Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and I've got Peter Jones from the Contrarians. G'day, mate. How are
Hello.
you? Good to have you
Great.
back.
Good to see you. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Not a
My
problem.
thrill.
We are going to cover the wonderful 1971 album T-Rex, The Electric Warrior. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our first impressions of T-Rex, and then we're going to do a song by song, blow by blow, exploration, deep dive, whether we like the songs or don't like the songs, and take it from there. So Pete, back in the day, tell us about your first impressions of T-Rex or when you first heard them.
Well, thank you. Again, a pleasure to be here, Peter. Thank you. This is a very interesting deep dive for me. It's very educational. I heard T-Rex, the singles, whatever we got here in the States, in real time. And I really think the only one that I really got a real hold of was Get It On. It was all over the place. The riff and the chorus were so catchy that, I instantly picked up on the song and liked it every time that it came on the radio. But I have to say, after that, I don't have much exposure with T-Rex at all. I've never owned any of his albums. And this was a refreshing and very, like I said, very educational dive back into this. I think if I can for a second, one of the things about this album, I like to put an album in kind of its context of what was going on at the time, if I may. If we're looking at 1971, we're talking one of the most prolific years in rock. The top albums from 71, Zeppelin 4, sold 27 million copies and climbing. Carole King's Tapestry, Aqualung. You don't even have to give the artists. Everybody knows what albums these are. Hot Rocks, bands like Uriah Heep, Chicago, Alice Cooper had multiple records come out in 71. So there was a lot going on. And so This was not an album or a band that I sought after from a long play standpoint. I knew the single. My sisters, who are 3 and 6 years older, liked it, but I never had a record to raid, and none of my friends in my listening group, whose even older brothers, had one that I could raid. So I was exposed to the radio, and at that time, that was it. Yeah,
it's really strange because they were huge in the UK, a little bit less so in Australia. But in America, they're sort of known as a one-hit wonder because Get It On that was their only top 10 hit. It hit number 10. But in UK, this album single-handedly, well, there's probably some debate with a lot of the other commentators, but was one of the forefront guardians of, glam rock. So this really, kicked off that whole movement. But me personally, Pete, I don't know, in the early 70s, did you ever get those compilation albums where you'd have 20 hits? So I think my older brother or older sister had one of these compilation albums called 20 Explosive Hits in 1971. And if you look at the second song, Hot Love,
right.
T-Rex, and that was probably my first exposure. And I heard a lot of their other songs played on the radio, Get It On, Jeepster, Telegram Sam. They were just played on the radio,
The evidence is clear, because if you look at the year-end charts rankings, this is UK now, not US. Hot Love was at 3, Get It On was at 11, Jeepster was at 23, and Ride a White Swan was at 38.
Absolutely.
So that was huge.
Absolutely. And going into record stores, I used to see a lot of posters of this iconic. This is the Slider album with Marc Bolan. It's part of pop consciousness, but you'd see a lot of this on posters and T-shirts. So he was everywhere. And we'll talk a bit more about it, but pound for pound, he was given probably David Bowie and Alice Cooper, well, in the Anglo world or Europe,
Right.
a run for his money. So, all right, well, that's great. So let's talk about Electric Warrior. I'll just give a little bit of the upper sort of stats. So this album went to number 15 in Australia. In the US, it hit number 32, but in the UK, it hit number 1 in 1971. So T-Rex previously were a folk rock band, and they weren't really getting anywhere. So you're talking about Marc Bolan and Mickey Finn, who's the percussion. So it's not really just Marc Bolan, it's really two.
Right.
This album was also recorded with Stephen Curry on bass and Bill Legend on drums. But there was a change of sound from folk rock to rock, and the results paid off in spades for Marc Bolan and Mickey Finn and the crew. So it, basically a lot of these songs instantly got played on radio, and they had the immediate cut through. So why don't we just do a track by track, starting off with Mambo Sun? What do you think of this song?
Well, I have copious notes here, so I will keep them
So do I.
concise
That's all right.
and
That's
to
all
the
right.
point here, because what you had asked, how if I'd given her a good listen. I probably over the last 2.5 weeks went through this more than a couple dozen times. Start stops all the way through, focus on a song here or there. So there's a lot in my head that is going around as I'm discovering this. First thing I notice about Mambo Sun is that it's very English sounding. It's very, very, and I'm going to use the word glam because right now I don't know what else to call it. Because if there wasn't glam before it, there was after it. So if it's its own definition, I think I'm going to have it be its own definition. It's an interesting, low tempo kind of guttural little groove to it. He recorded his guitars very interestingly, and part of this is the beauty of Tony Visconti's production, that his main guitar would be in one channel, and then all of his overdubs would be on the other channel. So you could hear him interplaying with himself, and it's multi-layered. The song only has 3 chords.
As most of T-Rex.
Yeah, it's in E,
that.
one of the great keys of rock. Get that open E so you can get that big E, A, and chords. It's all kinds of attitude in it. His vocals, this will be a common theme. I don't have a resolution or a concise point of where I stand on his vocals yet. I'm still going through it. At first, I hear a lot more kind of speaking than actual singing, but it's early. It also is kind of indicative of the rest of the album. Compositionally, it's kind of static. It sits on more of a straight line. There aren't choruses or bridges that stick out, like other compositions of the day. Certainly like a Carole King or America and other bands who were out at the time, but it's so unique to what T-Rex was doing. The lyrics I put down, and I have all the lyric sheets too, because I normally don't do this. I'm not really a lyrics guy, but I dove into these because they are just kind of interesting and all over the place. I said, these are definitely early 70s, post psychedelia lyrics. Anything that's got beep bop moon and shadowless horse and anything like that is not commonplace from what was going on in the pop world before that, and it's a strong characteristic. So it's an interesting opening track, that it's a more subdued tempo. It's not a big burner or anything like that. So that was kind of a surprise to my ears. I wasn't expecting that, but it was an interesting opener, and I think it's a great toe in the water as I'm starting to get into what's going on with this album.
Yeah, no, nicely put. I think he's a bit of a crooner, and he's got these really throaty vocals. He's unique. There's nobody that really sounds like Marc Bolan. And after Marc Bolan, there were thousands of imitators, but it's
Right.
very sexual, very sensual. You can understand why he had this huge female fan base. They were just swooning with him. But one word that I would describe is smooth. All the way through, he's a smooth cat.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
lyrically, it creates more of a feeling. If you want to look at what does it mean in a deep dive, I think a lot of it is wordplay, but to create an atmosphere and a feeling. Like looking at the lyrics of this, beneath the bebop moon, I want to croon with you. Beneath the Mambo Sun, I've got to be the one with you. So he's got
Pretty
his own,
straightforward. Yeah.
got his own sort of lyrics. And when we go into the various tracks, it even gets more oblique and unique. And it's
Yes.
Marc Bolan speak, but it creates it. You know, a lot of it may seem nonsensical, but it creates an atmosphere. And when it's melding words with music, it's real and it works. But I think it's a great opening track. It's got that pulsating drum, that really fuzzy guitar riff, and the falsetto.
Yes, lots of distortion. Yes.
Falsetto backing vocals. And it's got a groove. It's got a groove and a click to it. And a lot of these tracks have a groove and a click to it. And yeah, all these songs, they probably have 3 chords. A lot of them they're rooted in the Delta blues or Muddy Waters. He even admits it himself that he's copied a lot of the Muddy Waters or Howling Wolf and made it to the masses, just put it into a pop song, 3 or 4 minute pop song, and just made it, you know, through the Marc Bolan prism, unique. But I think it's a great opening track, and it really, this is the Marc Bolan T-Rex sound. We are here.
Yes.
So the next one is Cosmic Dancer. What do you think of this one?
This one is also, I first thing I wrote down was beautiful song. I liked the nice, gentle acoustic intro. And then to me, and it's maybe you'll either concur or not, to my naive ears, at least in an association standpoint, instantly I'm getting similarities to Space Oddity, things like that were done very early Bowie. I'm hearing the low strings. I'm hearing this brought in orchestration behind something that normally, and even in their incarnation before, that could be just an acoustic guitar and a percussionist. But now with these droning strings and this sweeping kind of overly melodic undercurrents, and it really creates that very classic Tony Visconti sound, whether it's Bowie or whether it's T-Rex. To me, it's got a Beatles element to it. I think it's, again, very English in its composition and delivery, which is not a bad thing. It kind of just stays in its lane, and it's, I think it's a better vocal performance than the opener. You know, what is it? What does it mean? Is it reincarnation? Is it, you know, is it Buddhist belief? Is it death? What is it? You know, what does dancing mean? And you can interpret that kind of any way you want. It's the common theme through the whole thing. I was dancing to this. I was dancing to that. I danced when I did this. It's a whole story, and it flows nicely from when he was young to he's 8, to the tomb, to the womb, back and forth. And you're like, okay, I'm engaged. I'm listening. And it's a very simple arrangement. It's a very simple backing, but it's effective. The combination of his, you know, subtle, because there's no aggression in the voice at all. It's very all low register too. He's not a guy who sings in a high register, which helps give that calming feeling. It makes it, like you said, we use smooth, you can use silky, you can use whatever you want. It sits in an area that listening wise is very comfortable. So I enjoyed the track, and I had to go back through that one on multiple times to kind of get a sense of maybe where it was going and what it was trying to do. But very interesting track.
Well, you're spot on. He did say that it's about reincarnation. So you picked up on that. It's dance of life as a metaphor, creation, life, death, destruction.
Okay.
So it's an interesting lyric. I love the falsetto backup vocals all the way through. It's the trademark Bolan or T-Rex sound. Very eerie, very haunting. And those strings adds a little bit of gravitas, makes it compelling. And yeah, you're not far wrong. It's sort of, it's in that Bowie wheelhouse, definitely.
Yeah.
And those two were very competitive between the years 71, 73, because that was the peak years. And Bolan was definitely probably, outselling Bowie for a period of time. One thing I like about this song, I love the backwards guitar outro. It's really spacey and
yes,
psychedelic.
I forgot to write that down.
Yeah, it's like that backwards. So look, track 2, killer.
Wonderful.
All right, Jeepster. So this was a single. What do you think of this one?
This is, the first up-tempo song. Could have been an opener to the album if people were looking at the tracks in a different way. I hear a lot of different nuances and waves to various styles. I hear Elvis. I hear country. I hear more specifically James Burton, Elvis's guitarist. It's in a very happy up key of A major. It's a smiley happy key, and the absolute trademark no. The 3 chromatic notes is just so screams country because that's one of their staples. And this is also one of the songs that kind of follows a traditional 1-4-5 kind of chord structure. So you can anticipate where the chord change is going, and it goes there. So it's really easy to listen to because the song just kind of flows really well. I think his O's and his kind of little punches, and people may think I'm nuts, but I'm going to tie this in even in more songs. Those have a Prince element to me. Those little high-pitched squeaks. And he would do them at the end of the ow. You do those little things. Very Prince-like to me. It's maybe missing a bridge, but that's maybe a pattern of his composition style because we're 3 tracks in and there really isn't a separate, bridge that you would say, okay, we're going to the bridge now. It's a very different song live. And I wanted to go back through some of these and see the comparisons between how he could do them live versus what was going on in the studio. It's a much more straightforward rock song live, but what it's done treatment-wise in the studio, like I said, it is a homage to all kinds of styles. It's blues, it's country, it's Elvis, it's all over the place. And again, this is very early 70s. You're so sweet, you're so fine, and Jeepster. It's a cool English early 70s word. You never hear somebody say that in the US. No one would do a song with the word Jeepster in it. It just wouldn't be there. And that's what makes this kind of unique, and all the metaphors. You're just like a car, so pleasing to hold. Again, we're talking about sex. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about guys and girls, as was common in this time and era. It still is, I guess. But the way he dances around them lyrically and metaphorically is very creative. And I think it's very interesting. It's not in your face. It's not blatant. It's not overly aggressive. it's just like you said, it's fun wordplay, and I'll tie that in later on another song. But you're onto something here, and it's going to carry on later. But I'll comment on then. But it's a fun song, and it's short, it's concise, and there it is.
Should have been a hit in the US. I was really scratching my head. Like Get It On was the song in America, but if I was the record company, I would have just, as soon as that started to descend in the charts, I would have put this out. So
Yeah,
that is
I
a
agree.
real hit. That's a real head scratch why this wasn't a hit. This is one of my favorite songs on the album. It's got so
mine
much.
too.
It's classy. It's simple. It's got a simple blues riff, which is Howling Wolf. It's dramatic. It's got the strings. It's got a groove. And you're right. It's a metaphor where, you know, you've got a vehicle, a Jeep, chasing a Jaguar, a girl.
Right.
And it's so smooth and sleek. And Tony Visconti was basically saying he recorded this with no overdubs. There's mistakes in this. You can hear a clunk of the microphone stand. There's imperfections. And Tony just said, let's keep it all in. And adds its charm.
Right.
So this song got played a hell of a lot in Australia. I remember that as a kid being played on radio, and it's one of their, if you know, they have the greatest hits. This is definitely one of the T-Rex songs that would be on greatest hits. So anyway, that's Jeepster. Monolith.
All right. This one's slow and heavy. I like the introduction with of him bringing the wah-wah into it now. Again, that's a very early 70s kind of thing, tailing off of Hendrix and his use of the wah-wah. You know, we mentioned Uriah Heep early on. You know, Mick Box, the wah-wah is a prominent thing. You know, so there's a lot of good stuff going on, and he brings that element into it, which takes this to a different sonic place. And here is where I hear Prince again. When you get to the oh yeahs, oh no's, the screams, you can hear the voice kind of breaking up. To me, this is what's it gonna be, babe? Do you want him or do you want me? From the Beautiful Ones in Purple Rain. It's passionate. It's got intensity. From a slower, and you know, the Beautiful Ones is slow also, and it works. And so for me, it's almost a gospel backing track, which is interesting against what the guitar and the bass is doing. And I want to give a shout out to the bassist, because there's some really great bass playing on this, you know, and in some of these really stripped down songs, the bass is kind of carrying the day. And it's, you know, again, you got to love the 70s, because bass players were, you know, they're forgotten now, you know.
Yeah.
It's aggressive vocals and a decent guitar solo. I maybe still am also formulating as to whether I think he's a great guitarist, and that really doesn't matter. He's very competent, and he knows what he wants to play. And my definition, if I can just stray for 1 second, of technique, people talk all the time. You need to play fast. You need to play scales. Nope, stop any of that crap. To me, technique is play what you want to play when you want to play it. If you can do that, you have technique. If he wants to play something simple, play something simple. And if he pulls it off, he's got the technique to do it. And I'm perfectly fine with that.
I agree with you. And it's the notes that you don't play, say, speak volumes.
Yes.
When to interject, when to put it in. I think within the world of, because the world of T-Rex is kind of confined, there is a certain soundscape. And
right.
I think the guitar licks that he does in the world of T-Rex are mighty fine.
Yeah.
And this song, it's got kind of a soul feel to it. You've got the soul backup singers. It's about star-crossed lovers. The lyrics are quite dense when you read about it. And I think I read on social media, they mean nothing, but at the same time, they mean everything at the same time.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah.
It's words and music that just matches. And, you know, so if you read it like poetry, it may seem nonsensical, but with music, it just matches and it works. It's got a tasty guitar riff, and Bolan just croons. He's just croontastic. He just croons over it, just so smooth. And look, the British, they came up with a lot of these smooth, fantastic singers, like hot on the heels of Bolan. And I was thinking, and I've got to mention, was Brian Ferry with Roxy music.
Absolutely. Right.
So, there was some great crooning. You had a different type of singer. Like on one end of the scale, you had the Robert Plants, the Ian Gillans, the Coverdales.
Yeah, you're not going to confuse.
Sort of like the,
no.
Like singing like a banshee, the pyrotechnics. But then you had this different type of rock singer, which you had, it was heavy, it was dense, but the singer would croon over it. And Marc Bolan fits that category. He's a crooner.
Right.
All right. Lean Woman Blues.
Here we have a full-on traditional blues song. This is full 12-bar blues. And this is not a negative. To me, it's the first straightforward traditional composition that somebody who had heard songs or a 12-bar blues or something before would recognize the form of how this song was laid out. I think his vocals are exposed just a little bit on the higher notes. It's a little thin, and he does have a very unique vibrato. It's extremely fast. And what is also interesting is that he plays his guitar the same way, is that he uses a very fast vibrato on notes that he sustains, which is interesting because any great guitarist will tell you their goal is to sound like they're singing when they're playing guitar, i.e. David Gilmour or somebody like that. So there is that unique connection that his vocal and his guitar styles are the same. He hears them the same. He delivers them the same. The solo work is a tiny bit messy, but it kind of works. I think it's way too short. I would want it to get developed a little bit more. And I put down tongue in cheek, it's not exactly the Yardbirds or Led Zeppelin, but that's okay because they would have taken it somewhere else. They're much more proficient soloists and that kind of thing. And that's not what he was trying to do. But it is a song that fits. You could easily play this track, with I Can't Quit You, Babe, or something else. And even though they're delivered differently, you would get the same sentiment because they're both steeped in the same structural and blues traditional composition, and they would both work side by side with each other, in my view.
I'd like that mixtape. I think that'd be excellent.
Right.
You could throw a few. I know. I like it. I like your take on that. Look, it's a slow down bluesy rocker. It's got a bit of a Stonesy Muddy Waters, because let's face it, Stones were mining the Muddy Waters, Howling Wolf catalog left, right, and center, as well as Zeppelin. It's a little ramshackle, but it's got lots of charm. I love the lyrics. Oh, lean love, all you give to me is lean love. Like a beggar in the sand with the sky in the hand, and I'm blue.
Right.
And the way he sings it, it's compelling.
There's not a lot of singers who could take what might be perceived as nonsensical kind of, prose and turn it into something that would not sound campy or stupid. And his delivery with his vocal range and the way, and he's a tremendous enunciator. His lyrics are very easy to understand. You can't always say that about a lot of the other rock, bigger, bombastic singers. Sometimes you have troubles picking words and things out, even from some of the best singers. But, it's very clean because it's not overloaded with double tracking. It's not overloaded with echoes or any other treatments on it. It's like, here's his voice. It's right there. And you hear the lyrics.
Absolutely. And that vibrato you were saying about, that was just when he pushes it, it definitely comes to the fore.
It flutters.
It
really
flutters.
quick.
It flutters. It flutters. Nice. All right. Well, now we get to the big kahuna. This is the song that side 2,
Right.
track 1.
Well, of course,
Get it on.
Yeah. This is an interesting thing to me. And sometimes in history, a song seems to completely outpace its brothers and sisters of a specific album. The analogy I've always used is that I look at Dream On and I listen to it, and I'm talking about not just the song itself, I'm talking about the sonics, how it was delivered, how it sounds so different than everything else that's on that record. Get It On sounds very different than the rest of the record. His voice is fuller. It's a straight on rock and roll song. The piano and the horns add a ton to the production on this. And, to me, all I wrote here was template of what came next, because the amount of copying that was done from this particular song alone, I mean, let's just go through Sweet's catalog. Can we? Let's just stop right there with just one band, let alone anybody else who was influenced. I think it's the best vocal performance so far on the album. All the stars aligned up on this one. And to me, this defined what was going to be called glam. It was a combination, and I think for a second we have to stop of what we think glam is, and that's a moving target. Glam, in my opinion, is an amalgamation of a whole ton of stuff. It's attitude, it's personality, it's dress, it's fashion, it's song, it's sonics, it's all kind of put into a mishmash, and out it comes. And if you've got somebody with his looks, his charisma, and I think we can go back to, and I think the reference they made was early of 71 when he did Hot Love on Top of the Pops. When he came out with all the satins and glitter on, nobody had seen that before. And it was like, what in the world is this? Life before Marc Bolan, life after. Yeah. Seminal moment. It changed. Things are different now.
He created it. He created
yes.
it. And you're creating your own template of music, basically.
Yeah, it's a great song. I think, unfortunately, there's a whole generation who, and I don't want to say only because it's a stunning cover. Power Stations is exceptionally well done.
Yes.
It's a monstrous song, but you owe it to yourself to know about the original.
Absolutely.
And listen to it in its original form. One is before the other doesn't exist without this one first. And you have to go back and tip the hat because it's an essential early classic rock, glam rock, whatever label you want to use, song of the early 70s, and will always be that.
I think this song is sex. It is just the most central vocal. And I mean, where you're dirty and sweet, clad in black, don't look back, and I love you, you're dirty and sweet. Oh yeah. I mean, it's just full on.
There's no misinterpreting on this one.
No. The riff was taken off a Chuck Berry song. So Marc Bolan in interviews said he wanted to sort of get that little Queenie type of riff going. I think it's pop perfection. And a bit of a shout out to Rick Wakeman. He played the keys, and also Ian McDonald. Right. And King Crisman on sax. So
and
when you look at Top on the Pops, you see they mime it, and Elton John's playing the keys, but he's not actually playing the keys.
Right.
But, that's the most commonly used video clip when you look at it on YouTube, or if they play it on music clip shows. Elton's on the
and that's a difficult song to pull off live with only one guitar, because you kind of want that undergrounding chunk, and then you need them. You kind of need them both, and that's why it works so well on radio.
Absolutely,
great song.
And when I listen to music, I always think, if I was in a band, would I love to play this song? This is the song I would love to play. I would love to play, on this song.
And I don't know what it is, but a lot of times the material will motivate a musician. All of a sudden, the drums sounded a little crisper. The energy was a little bit higher. I mean, all these things that went along with it. Like I said, everything just lined up perfectly.
Would I be going out? Would I be going out of to left field and even saying AC/DC with the guitar?
No, the separation, and that's exactly what I was just talking about. What Malcolm did and what Angus did is so essential, and neither one of them works without the other. And that breaking down of one guitar part here and another guitar part here kind of became a staple. If you had two guitars, you split them. Eddie Van Halen would do different. He'd put all his rhythm in one, all his solos in the other, and it all creates a sonic scape, especially if you were in a headphone era, that you could hear that panning and the creativeness of the production and the mixing and that type of thing. But I don't think first of all, it's just simple, straight kind of 4 on the floor drumming, which is what Phil Rudd's been doing forever. And a more traditionally grounded guitar part, which is Malcolm, and an augmented, more, adding frilly guitar guy over here, and that's Angus. And I think it's in spades in this song. I don't think you are off at all.
Yeah, well, thank you, because like AC/DC started in 73. This song was in 71, was played all over the radio. Bon Scott is probably, I don't know, our viewers will correct me, fraternity, he wasn't in AC/DC yet. AC/DC wasn't formed, but I'm sure that the Young Brothers would have heard this song on the radio. And, they are huge Chuck Berry fans. So when they see interviews with AC/DC saying what are their influences, and they say, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, and Chuck Berry. And this is a Chuck Berry song.
Well, take a perfect example that just jumped to my head, having been in an AC/DC tribute band myself. Hopefully I can recall these. I listened to Livewire. Livewire to me has that get it on kind of, it's right there. I don't think that's a stretch at all, Pete. I think you're way on it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. Planet Queen.
This one is, you had mentioned it on the previous song. This is what I wrote on this. It's just full on sex innuendo. This is, it's slow and plotting with, and I don't mean plotting in a bad way, folks. Back to the acoustic guitar. I love the backing vocals on this. I don't know if it's just the fact that I'm really old. Give Me Your Daughter in 2022 sounds a little weird. I understand it at the time, so maybe I'll try and overlook that a bit. Just maybe it's just my old head going off the wrong way, but it's got a lot of lyrics for kind of running in place. There's a lot of repetition and monotony on this one. But again, as it moves along in intensity, it's kind of his vocal delivery that pushes the song, not a change in composition or key or chord structure. It's his vocal delivery. As he gets a little more aggressive, you can start to hear him breathe and pant. Again, more of the Prince elements. That stuff's all over Purple Rain and earlier albums. His breathing and coming off of a verse or something with a spark of some type of vocal flare or fire or something. And it's not one of my favorite ones. This one was a little harder to listen. But I like the change, especially from Get It On. It's definitely a change of pace as you're going through from an album track standpoint. So Probably this one is probably one of those ones I need to have even some more listens to, so that recalling it just really kicks in. But
Yeah.
those were my notes on that one. So I'm maybe missing some little nuances on that one a little.
Yeah. One thing I've got to say is the production on this album is big. It is special, and
Yes, it
you
is.
can actually hear the plectrum strumming, the little clicks of the plectrum. You know, it's a headphones album. You hear all these little nuances, and I've got to tip my hat to Mickey Finn. The bongos in the background,
Yes.
the percussion. He's very important.
Yeah, you take him out, you'll miss it.
Yeah.
There's no
And
question.
I'd have to say those two lads were very pleasing on the eye. And I tell you what, from a pop perspective, because if you look good, you're halfway there to pop stardom.
Right. Right.
And those two definitely had the face for pop. But I like this song, and yeah, the lyrics are going to the Marc Bolan headspace of, you know, the psychedelic, the outward. Planet Queen, penchants to dream. She used my head like a revolver. Wow.
Right.
They don't write lyrics like that anymore.
That doesn't rhyme, does it?
Yeah. All right, Girl, which is a bit of a ballad. What do you think of this song?
Yeah, you know, I wrote down it's my favorite song so far. I really connected to this one. I think it's the best melody of the album so far. Again, there's a lot of Bowie elements in here, and I do want to be respectful that my limited knowledge of both T-Rex and Bowie, if I'm putting a cart before a horse, or a horse, you know, vice versa, I want to give respect to whomever did it first. I don't always know in the timeline who did what, but it definitely has a Bowie flair, and whether Bowie copied it from him, and that's what I recognize now. So I want to be fair about that. This one was interesting because when I heard the vocal, and I'm a huge fan of this, I heard elements of Davy Jones from the Monkees. I heard that, and I was like, Davy could sing this. It would work. I'm not saying he has to be or sound like Davy, but there was, again, something very right English and British or whatever it is about it that Davy would be the guy. It wouldn't be Mickey. It wouldn't work. But Davy has that kind of tonality. It's a little higher and thinner, just like Mark's is. And here's where we get to the point you had made earlier. I don't understand the lyric, but Ian Gillan once said, it often isn't the word that is important, but the rhythm that comes from it. And the fact that he was such a tongue-in-cheek words play guy, just pick Space Truckin', for example, good grief. Dance around with boring Alice. Yeah. If the rhythm works, and that's why Peart was such a great lyricist, because he recognized the rhythmic flow of vocabulary and words and prose and knew how he could shape them to the music that they had. It works perfectly here, regardless of what he may or may not be saying. The horns add a lovely depth and maturity to this song. I do think it's shamingly too short. I would have liked to have heard more of this, a little bit longer and more developed and more composition a little further on. But this was my best listen so far.
Well, I put a very simple song structure. And the lyrics are very direct. I do know to love, but I've fallen in deep. I'm in your spell control. I'm devoted to you. That's the sort of template of what these lyrics are all about.
Right.
I'm yours. And what I just quoted is not the lyrics, but that's my interpretation. He's
right.
just under the spell of this person in this ballad, and it's a nice palate cleanser.
Yes.
And song listing is very important in the album, because I think it's really sort of listed perfectly, and this is just a nice bit of a break between Planet Queen and a bit more of a reprise of the old Get It On. We'll talk about that in the set called The Motivator. So I think it's a nice little break. And yeah, I agree with you. Maybe a little bit more, but it is what it is. So
right.
All right.
Yeah. Motivator, straightforward rocker. And I said it's got similar traits to Get It On. The guitar licks in here remind me of some CCR stuff. And it rhythmically channels Get It On. There's a lot of similarities rhythmically between what the rhythm guitar is playing. Strong vocal performance, again, limited in range, but again, that's not who he was. He wasn't going to break glass. He wasn't going to reach for high notes or extended notes. It's simple and to the point. And, I don't think it needs to be said any more than that from my observation on it. It's just a straight rock and roll song that's good tempo. It's again, pacing I think on the later half of this album, pacing is better than the front half. I do like how these songs flow a little bit better later in the album. Great song.
Yeah. I've got it as a sequel to Get It On, or maybe Child of Get It On.
Right.
Every instrument has space between it. It's in the right spot. There's a groove. It's got that 3-chord progression, which is the Marc Bolan template. And, it's amazing what you can do with 3 chords.
We're back in E. We're back in the key of E.
Yeah. But again, super compelling. It's a really compelling listen. And maybe this could have been the single that they could have done in America. If
it has elements to that. Yeah.
If you want to tap into the vein of Get It On. But yeah, I think it's a great song. Next one, Life's a Gas.
Here's where I had kind of a problem. This one is not getting anything new here from the earlier records, at least to my young years on this particular recording. The added guitar elements are, they're very creative. The one particular solo he did instantly reminded me of the guitar tone that Jimmy Page uses on Fool in the Rain. It's got that octave divider with a little bit of, not so much flange, but it's got a little bit of tremolo on it. Instantly, all I heard was Jimmy's solo in Fool in the Rain. This one specifically is just too short. It almost just kind of doesn't even develop yet. I was waiting for it to get going, and I said, "Is it unfinished? Did it?" So this one didn't really give me anything new, and it didn't go anywhere in the short period of time that was there. But stylistically, it fits with the rest of the record without any issue there.
To my ears, it's got a bit of an anthemic quality. There's a bit of a flowing melody. The lyrics are basically about bemoaning lost opportunities, but say life is a mystery and you've just got to accept for what it is. I don't mind it. I don't think it's the strongest song on the album, but let's talk about the last one. And I'm really quite favorable about this one, which is really kind of different to anything that's been on the album before, and that's Rip Off. What do you think of this song? And
just the other quick tie-up on Life's a Gas, again, it's a very British thing, as we hear Steve Marriott, at the Rock and the Fillmore, it's really been a gas,
Yes.
Again, you don't say that in the US. Nobody's saying that over there. They're saying it's cool or groovy or something else, but gas is not something that was done in the US. So I like how that stays on that side of the pond. It's a ripoff, and this is fascinating. I love that you kind of teased where we're going with this. To me, this is most Beatle-like of all of them. I instantly hear his vocal delivery, and I hear I'm the Walrus. And what John was doing in that kind of style. Forget orchestration, forget arrangement, for anything else. It's one of the better compositions. And I made a note here that this is really kind of the first time I noticed the drummer doing something other than keeping time. He's got some fills now. He's starting to stretch out a little bit. There's a little more development going on instrumentally. It added something really nice. And I said, why did it take so long to get to that? It's a little repetitive, but the production builds so nicely. Great sax interlude. And I said it again, to reiterate, I waited too long for something like this. It shouldn't have come on the last track. Because now, if you're going to end with something, not a bad track to end with, because clearly I'm on a happy note listening wise. And it's really well done. And, it'll be interesting. And I don't know the material post this, if that particular writing style was something that was a one-off, or was that carried on into something after that? I don't know that because I'm not knowledgeable enough to make that call. Yeah, but very interesting song. And it definitely was a whole sonic departure from, and a compositional departure from what was happening on the earlier 10 tracks.
Yeah, nice. I think it's a great album closer, and it was a precursor to some of his later albums that went into a slightly different wheelhouse.
Were they less popular?
Definitely. So
yeah, okay.
T-Rex was popular between 71 to 73, and then he was on a bit of a downward on 74, 75. And before he sadly passed away in a very tragic accident, he was doing a tour with the Damned. So, and I'm sort of scratching my head and wondering what it could have been. What would have his style of music been? Would he have been into that sort of punky type of more aggressive music? This song may be, I don't know, a window to the opportunity, or to the sort of style of music he may have done later in the decade if he was still alive, because it is very angry. The vocals are a little bit punky, bit spiky. There's a bit of a stop and start riff, which is jarring, unsettling, but compelling. And you've got the string arrangements. And if you listen to the string arrangements and the horns or the sax, it's kind of avant-garde. It's very jazzy. A
little bit, yeah.
Towards
but
the
that's
end,
that's what helps really kind of build the momentum and intensity.
And it's got a bit of a crescendo, and you listen to it goes really jazzy. It really goes very avant-garde with the outro. One thing I wrote down the word Jack White. I could imagine Jack White of the White Stripes doing a song like this. That really sort of like very out there, because Jack White is very much of a similar sort of mold to T-Rex in the sense of exploring the blues, simple song structure, but deconstructing it and making it modern. And that's what T-Rex was doing at that particular time. He was deconstructing the blues and putting it out to the masses through his prism. And I can see Jack White's a similar cat to T-Rex. And I just wrote down, because I'm a big White Stripes fan, and I thought, I wrote down, this is very much in that wheelhouse. I can imagine Jack White really making this song and making it his own.
Right.
But getting back on point, I think this is a really great album closer, and it leaves us an impression.
I think so. It shows for other lack of word, maturity from the opener to the closer, that it wasn't just, sex-driven chanting with low grumbly drums, and I'm not marginalizing that. But that was kind of his template early on. But by the end of this record, this is a completely different kind of composition. This is, in a different place. It has the blues, but it's not blues based. It's not, the chords are much more non-traditional, and where they went and how they were used. And it showed a whole different style of songwriting. And it's interesting when an album does that, because you're like, oh, is that the new thing? Is that where they were going?
Yeah. Yeah, well, they were definitely going into something more progressive, but that was a couple of albums. When you're looking at the slider,
okay,
that's the back, but that's the front. You're definitely going still in that T-Rex wheelhouse, where you've got the 3 chords, the crooning vocals, the strings, the falsetto background, backing vocals, but still very much in that wheelhouse. And
right.
It was like, if you're on a good thing, stick to it. And that's what
right.
he was doing right up to
No,
about
I agree.
1973. So, well, thank you, Pete. So I guess my personal opinion, I think this is a classic album. What's your opinion overall? Positive? I by the sounds of it, sounds positive.
Yeah, I have a kind of a little summation here. And, I love context. I love looking at how things happen and why things happen. And this is a great way to do that, because my senior year in college for my music degree, my final was, and this would have been 1985. If the Beatles were a new band in 1985, would they have been as successful? That was my final exam. Right. Write your ideas. A lot of things happened here. And this is from the US take of an observation from the other side of the water there. We can't overstate the importance of the breakup of the Beatles in 1970. There's now this huge void with the Beatles gone, especially in England. Here comes this very charismatic, good-looking, kind of moxie-driven, edgy, sharp dresser who comes on and looks great, has just the right kind of sound. And I'm not trying to dismiss or marginalize this as a teen thing, but you can clearly see the difference, because that part didn't hit here. We gravitated more to Alice Cooper, which is the antithesis of that. It's completely the opposite direction. We were going heavier. He was still, the Zeppelins and the Stones and all those things were still ELP and Uriah Heep. And, we'd mentioned Alice. All these are albums in 71 that in the US, we gravitated to right off the bat. He has all the elements for a perfect storm of everything to come together. His performance on Top of the Pops, and we clearly see from a single standpoint in England how that props up his status and props up their success. And they're impossible to marginalize or negate or even criticize as it's just an image thing. It was just the Bay City Rollers or something. Well, look, even the Bay City Rollers sold a lot of records. Okay. You can call image whatever you want. They sold a crap load of records. And so to me, this is, here versus there. And like I said in the beginning, we didn't listen to T-Rex or seek out T-Rex. And I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional. I just think it was out of the course of whatever natural evolution it was. We heard a band, we went and got their stuff, we followed them. The next album came out, we got it. We discovered a new band, a trend changed, off we went. And there's just too much music in the world to listen to absolutely everything. But it's so to answer your question, what is my overall view of this? I am still formulating an opinion. And one of the things that is sticking out in my head is that the number of listens that I was giving this was because I was having trouble latching on to some of the other songs. I would see the title. I couldn't remember what feel it was or what the melody was. I would listen to it again. It would refresh in my head. I would go away from it for a day. I'd look back at the track list and you go, okay, I remember that one, but I don't remember that one. And I'm the guy who can sit in the car on the way to a substitute gig on drums, listen to 3 new songs in the car and play them that night. But every band is different. This would have to be an album that I revisit more often to have it start to reach me, because as good as some of the comments were, and I can take them isolated like that as a track and hear it, the album as a whole didn't resonate with me. Doesn't make it bad. And it doesn't make it not worth listening. It's just not sticking. And I respect that in my own analysis of things, that I don't know if it is going to take a different set of listening, like I said. So I really don't know how to formulate, like a rating or anything. It's exceptionally well done. Production is spectacular. And for what they were trying to deliver, I think they absolutely nailed it. Just absolutely nailed it. Yeah. So I have a lot of respect and admiration for that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I got you on this show, because it's like a set of fresh ears, because I've lived with this album a lot longer.
Yes.
Because it was part of pop culture in Australia. And it was really interesting hearing your perspective, where it was not so much in America, because T-Rex, other than that one song, wasn't so well known and did probably translate. And perhaps it's because it was too British, because there are a lot of acts that didn't translate from that glam era. And this is going to be a whole different topic that we could possibly do one day.
That's true.
The Sweet, which only had 1 or 2 songs. Slade didn't translate at all. Even David Bowie found it tough. In the 70s, he had chart success, but in singles.
And it's not a mistake in the US market that once he gets to Let's Dance, something that works in the US market is his sales go through the roof.
Absolutely, because he had to tailor it into a radio-friendly soul synth.
But it was interesting because you said that, because it wasn't too many years earlier that, here in the US, I mean, we couldn't get enough of Herman's Hermits, and why that stuck. I mean, they were everywhere, they had 1 million songs on all the time. Everybody knew all the Herman's Hermits stuff.
Absolutely. But one thing I do want to point out, and it's the question, where would Bolan's career been if he was still alive? And I put my hand on my heart. I think he would have had a hit or a couple of hits in the 80s. I could honestly see him doing a Let's Dance. He's got the voice. He's got that crooning voice. He's still got the looks. He would have been sort of that right age. Because let's face it, the 80s was full of comebacks. Tina Turner. David Bowie. Yeah.
Did he ever record anything that didn't have Tony Visconti as producer?
I think so. Yes.
Very late. Very, very late, because I know almost all the early stuff was all Tony. And I'm not suggesting that Tony is like the magic elixir.
Yeah.
But
I am sure he would have had hits in the 80s. And it would have been, if someone styled him like that David Bowie Let's Dance, I'm positive he would have been up there in the mix. And I wouldn't have heard it, like the Power Station, with the Get It On. That would have been a good cue for him to come back in. And
absolutely.
Let's face
the tie-in would have been, the tie-in would have been huge.
And Robert Palmer, he's a crooner. Look at the style of music Robert Palmer was doing with Simply Irresistible, Addicted to Love. Not a real screamer, not a hysterical, but he's got this real heavy sort of wheelhouse, this very confined sound, but he's crooning over it.
But then I'll also suggest that he followed the Visconti formula. He just substituted strings and horns with keyboard punches. He did the same thing. He's got a heavy underlining drum with a crooner voice over the top, but he's adding just these
Yeah.
And little things here where Scotty was using a string or he'd use a horn. Same idea, just different instrumentation that was right for the times.
Pete, we've got a show in the works. We've just, I think
There you go.
we've got another show in this. Pete,
Right.
thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this. I think as I said, it's just been wonderful to have two perspectives, somebody that's had this album or lived with these T-Rex most of his adult life, and somebody that's relatively new and sort of listening with fresh ears. So viewers, tell us what you think. Big T-Rex fan, what your views of this album were or are. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation, and I'm sure we're going to have Pete Jones on the show very soon, and we'll do some more stuff soon. Cheers.